Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today, oh my goodness, I am exhausted. Yesterday was a heck of a day with the Dreams kind of unofficial release. I'm still not fully sure what to call it because it's not early access because we've had early access for a year. Well, regardless, today I am kind of doing a preemptive video for the full release of Dreams, where I want to talk about 5 dreams, and actually more than 5, but 5 main and some honorable mentions of dreams that have really strongly affected me in some way. Now, initially I was going to basically call this the say all, be all, end all list of games that everybody should play first, but obviously that's very subjective. And so I decided to sort of redo this video as a games that really had a big impact on me and games that I think will have a big impact on you. And in general, the concept of the original video still holds, where I think that all of these games deserve to be played in their own right, and also I think objectively are very unique when it comes to games within Dreams. And this isn't to say that these are the best games in Dreams, hands down. Obviously, if I were to make a list like that, it would probably be 4 horror games, but that's just because I love horror games, and again, it's all very subjective, and so today I want to talk about these 5 games because they had an impact on me, and because I believe that they are unique enough and different enough to give you a really good scope of where Dreams is and where it's come from in terms of the games that are possible to create. So if you enjoy that sort of thing, feel free to leave a like down below, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, but no pressure as always, and yeah, let's get right into the list. Now, starting off, I want to remind you that this is in no particular order, but anyways, let's start off with number 1, which is Unknown. Now, this is one of the best horror games that I have found within Dreams, hands down, but the reason that I picked it for this list is because it checks the box of a few different types of games I've played within Dreams. So there's a lot of horror games within Dreams, and if you want to know why that is, feel free to go watch it. I did a whole video on why horror games are so prevalent in Dreams, and why they work so well, but for this one specifically, not only is it a very good horror game, it is an impressive lesson in how you can create an aesthetic within Dreams without being super complicated, and it's a very good example of another genre of games, which I also ended up including in the honorable mentions of this video, but another genre of games that I don't see a lot of places outside of Dreams and outside of indie games, but it is very prevalent in indie games. I don't know if you've played the Stanley Parable or any sort of very meta game like that, but I think that Unknown checks a lot of boxes in reference to that. I don't want to get too detailed because the shock factor in some of these, and I mean shock factor in terms of the surprise, not as a jump scare, because there are not jump scares in this one, except for at the very end, but it's very obvious that it's coming, so expect that. But it's not a jump scare, it's just very surprising in a very impressive way, and I think that this is definitely a game to check out, regardless of if you like horror games or not. If you really don't like things that are eerie and creepy, definitely don't play it, but there's a lot of boxes that this game checks, and I don't want to give too much information away, so I'm going to end it there, but definitely play this one. It's one of those that's not super heavy in the gameplay department, though you do play the entire time. It's certainly not a showcase, but it's more of an experience, and I think it is very reminiscent of a lot of the other creepy horror type experiences, like I said, one of which I will mention during the honorable mentions. But moving forward from that, I want to talk about a game that is actually a very recent game. It is from one of my most recent streams before the actual release of the story mode of Dreams and the official, unofficial release that was on February 11th. But this game is called Acha Oni. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm not sure. I couldn't find any pronunciation of it online, but it is an incredibly simple looking game, but still very unique in its own right, and though there aren't a whole lot of different assets used here, I don't think they're really necessary. And the thing that surprised me most about this game right from the onset, and you can see from the expression on my face as I am reacting to this via that stream where I played it, it controls incredibly uniquely. And I talk about this a lot on stream, but I don't think I mentioned it much in videos recently, largely because I've been busy with a bunch of other different things. But I think that this game controls so differently from what I would call the base level, which is the base puppet of Dreams. And that is something that the second I notice that within any sort of game that I'm playing, whether it be on stream or just in my spare time, it's something that always impresses me, because being someone that spends a lot of time in create mode, I know how difficult it is to tweak animations and come up with animations that really make sense. Now, obviously, the characters' pigtails are a little bit hilarious, but I do think that the rest of the animations just feel so unique, and that's something that makes the game really fun. When you play through a lot of Dreams like I do, you run into a lot of the same game over and over with different skins over it. And by that I mean that the game will control almost identically, and the HUD, although it may be somewhat unique, is something that's not completely different than something I've seen before. And it takes a lot for something to really impress me, and generally when something does impress me to that extent, it's because of this unique control scheme. And I haven't even gotten into the fact that it plays amazingly past just the fact that the character runs differently than other things that I've seen. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on that, even though I already have, because I believe that this may come from a different character that was then reskinned for this game, but I couldn't find any source for that. I just wanted to mention that in case that is the case. But additionally to just how beautiful it looks, even though it's quite simple, the controls are good enough and the combat is deep enough for it to feel like they can give me a challenge. Now, I know that that's kind of weird to understand, so let me try to rephrase. Basically, within a few minutes of starting this game, I knew the controls and they felt smooth and responsive enough for me to go into tougher fights, like the kind of mini-boss and then actual boss of this game, to really understand, okay, I know how to succeed in this, and I can rely on the controls to get me there so long as I fail. Basically, it's the idea that if I fail in this, or if I get hit by the enemy, it's my fault because I didn't hit the button in time, not the game's fault because I hit the button in time and either collision detection was off, or for some reason it didn't register in time. It was incredibly responsive, which is probably just the easiest way to say what I'm trying to explain here. And not only that, but the further I got in this, the more I realized how deep the combat system is. Now, sure, the enemies don't always aggro right onto me. At the time they probably should, but there's a parry in this game. Not only have I rarely seen a block in sort of RPG-esque games, but a parry? No. That is incredibly difficult to code, takes a lot more time, and also requires that, like I said, the controls be incredibly responsive to begin with. Because if you're going to add a parry to a game, that has to be something that is on a very small time window, or the game's no longer going to be difficult. It's just going to parry everything that comes at you. And so getting that feel right is incredibly important. And it's something that I think even the earlier Dark Souls games struggled with. And I'm talking about Demon Souls specifically, because that did have some issues that, looking back, it's not just that I was bad. I was bad, but it wasn't all that. Anyways, I'm gonna rant about this game for forever if I keep going, because it is truly the best playing game that I have found so far, even though it has such a simple premise. So if you have any interest in RPGs like Dark Souls, even if you're not interested in the super hard aspect of them, because this, again, is quite early on, in that there are only 2 levels that aren't super difficult, I highly recommend you try it out. It's a really good example of something that's possible within Dreams. So now we're going to move on to the wonderful Broken Kindling. Now, this is still a work in progress, and I was kind of hesitating to put it on this list, but kind of for the reason that I talked about the previous one, this runs fantastically. Not only are the environments gorgeous and the HUD is unique, but the way that they have created the environments around this 2D plane, which is not a new thing, mind you. It's actually a pretty popular style, and one that I've actually used in my own games within Dreams. But they've taken that and combined it with a character that, although they are reminiscent of Hollow Knight, and I mean, I would not call it a exact clone of Hollow Knight in terms of the character, though it does control very similarly to it, and I can say that because I've been playing Hollow Knight a lot recently. But there are a lot of similarities there, but I think there is enough interesting and new about this to make it its own piece of art, honestly. And more so than that, it is just really fun to play. If there was a little bit more done to make the character of this game a little bit more unique from Hollow Knight, I would be all for that, because otherwise it's just going to kind of come off as Hollow Knight in another world, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I wouldn't call that a remake of any kind. I'd call it a really interesting adaptation, especially given that these environments are fully 3D and are reminiscent of Hollow Knight, but only in the sense that they are like dark and brooding and kind of creepy without being violent. But basically, the reason that I put this in this list is because it plays fantastically, because it looks gorgeously, the HUD's great, it just has so much potential, and there was so much heart put into it, and you can really feel that while you're playing it. Not only is this a work in progress in the sense that it's unfinished, which is, I mean, the majority of Dreams, honestly, most of mine are unfinished at this point, but it is a work in progress in the sense that you can see bits and pieces of the world that this creator is trying to make being placed in different spots. And although they're not fully pushed into their entirety, like this is not finished, and some of the quotes from the characters that are around the world don't fully make sense yet because the game's not finished, well, that's the only reason why. The world building is truly incredible, the platforming's fun, the combat works totally perfectly. I mean, as far as a game of this depth in terms of combat can work, but it's just a very good game. I highly, highly recommend you try this out, and I don't want to spend another 20 minutes just on this one. Alright, so we're on to the last two here before we get to a very quick mention of the honorable mentions, because I could rant about these games forever, but this lovely game is called Shifting Islands, and I had to put this in here. I know it's from very early on within the Dreams Early Access, but even back then I was shocked with how detailed it was, and obviously it is not an HD Dark Souls game, nor is it as complicated visually as a lot of the other games on this list. But it has such a personality and such a uniqueness to it that still, even within the Dreams aesthetic, manages to impress me. There's a very simple gameplay addition to a normal platformer where you can jump, and every time you jump, the platforms that are blue disappear and the platforms that are pink appear, and the other way around. So it adds a little bit of a puzzle element to this platformer, and what honestly impressed me the most and gave this game the most personality, in my opinion, was the addition of the collectibles. And now every game here and there has collectibles or points that you can get, but this one specifically took the extra step to add a reward for those collectibles in costume pieces for this wonderful little fuzzball, which was actually the name of the clip that I used for this video before I went back and looked and found that it was called Shifting Islands. But it just has so much personality, and the level itself, although there's no background, being able to see the other parts of the level gives enough background for me for it to feel incredibly unique. And that's something that I struggle with in my own levels, is creating a background that is detailed enough but not too detailed to where it takes away from the rest of the game. And this level does it fantastically, or this game does it fantastically. I'm very excited to see more from this creator, and honestly, as with the Hollow Knight game I talked about previously, or Broken Kindling, I'm just going to call it the Hollow Knight game, I'm sorry. But as with that one, I can see this becoming an entire game, even with a character that literally is just a fuzzball. Because not only do you get hats for this character, but you can get different colors for them as well, and different accessories. It's just so cute, and so much personality for something that was created within Dreams. It truly blew me away back then, and it continues to now, so I highly recommend you go play it, because it had a big impact on me, but also, it's just really impressive. And it's so complete. And I know that that's something that at some point we need to start expecting from things within Dreams, but it's just so good. I don't know how else to end this, so I'm just going to end it there. Alright, so moving on to Hello World. This is the last one that I would consider on this top 5, because I wanted to limit it to 5 to really challenge myself to pick 5 that deserve to be here. But this is one of the most unique games that I have played within Dreams. It was recommended to me on a stream recently, and it is so strange and kind of falls under a similar category to Unknown, the first game that we talked about, in terms of it being kind of like meta and breaking the fourth wall a little bit. But it is just so specific to Dreams and so silly, in addition to being kind of like meta and creepy. I don't know. It deserves a place specifically for that, because that sort of game is something that I don't really see outside of Dreams. Like I said with Unknown, it does exist within indie games, but being able to tell these short stories like this one does in a sort of meta, strange way is something that I don't think, in a short story sense, is really possible outside anywhere except for Dreams. Not only that, but I do see this format used a lot, and I think that this was just one that has been on my mind a lot recently and represents that category super well, and so I wanted to include it. Also, it's just done very well, and I think it's very polished, even in comparison to some of the other ones on this list. And I know it's very basic, but that's something that makes it so surprising when you do see the parts of it that are particularly polished. So yeah, I highly recommend you go play it. I'm not going to show too much here because I don't want to give away the silly story that it is, even though it's not like there are spoilers. It's quite short. But yeah, definitely recommend that you go play this, and especially if you have any friends that do play Dreams, send them this one. It's sort of becoming an inside joke at this point. Alright, now let's get into some honorable mentions, which will be quite quick, but I wanted to first mention Project Hail Redux. Again, this was one released earlier on within Dreams Early Access. I was considering still putting it over oh gosh, what was it called? Hello World, but I decided not to, just because I think Hello World represents a bigger portion of Dreams that I find so interesting. But Project Hail Redux was, I want to say, the first game that I think felt like a kind of like I mentioned with Broken Kindling, that it felt like it was going somewhere. It felt like this could be a complete game, but at the same time, it also felt like it was interesting in its own respect, where people could start releasing Silent Hill or Resident Evil, like classic Resident Evil type games, in bite-sized portions like this, and it works really well. It's creepy, it gives you just enough, and it's not too long, I guess. And I know that that's something that I think a lot of people care about within Dreams, is that it's not going to take days to finish a Dreams game. I think that's going to disappear the more complicated these games get, but this is definitely worth mentioning and definitely worth playing, especially if you're a classic survival horror fan. Now, it does use a more common type of camera angle and movement controls, which I appreciate, but at the same time, it is very classic survival horror. I won't say any more about it, but highly recommend that one as well. I don't think it fit the list for me in terms of the 5 most impactful games for me so far within Dreams. But moving on, I want to talk about one that I believe may have been created by someone at Media Molecule. It doesn't appear to be tagged like that, but I think it may have been, because it came out so early on within, I think even within the beta. But this one is called Panna Spot, and I don't really have a lot to say about it. It is a story, it is adorable, it's really cute, and even though I've talked a lot about how this platform is great for like mini stories, I've only really mentioned horror games, so I felt like throwing this as an honorable mention, just so you know, it's not just horror games. I just enjoy horror games, so those are the ones that I end up playing and remembering. But this one is adorable, worth playing. Definitely have the sound on, but I'm sure if you were part of Early Access, you did play it, and if you weren't, definitely look back on this. It's completely worth it to play. And finally, I didn't feel good putting this on the top 5 list, but this was probably the closest to being there, and when I filmed this video originally, it was on there, but it's just not enough for me to qualify it anymore, but it is still incredible. And the reason why I think it's on this list to begin with is because anybody that was there early on in Early Access or in beta remembers this as one of the first moments of, oh my goodness, this platform can create incredible games graphically. And looking at this game now and going back to replay it, obviously I have seen a few of these at this point that do look this good, but this really was the first one that I know a lot of other people saw, where we were just blown away by the absolute breadth of lighting effects that you can have within this game. and how realistic the textures can get. And of course, it is not a full game yet, although it sounds like they want to make it a full game. I haven't seen any updates since this whole demo was released, but I do think it's still worth going back to play, especially if you are just getting into Dreams and haven't really seen this aesthetic yet. It definitely will blow you away as much as it did me and as much as it did a lot of people when early access was first starting. Definitely keep an eye out for games like this that are more fleshed out and where there is more gameplay, but I think that this holds a special place in my heart and in the community in general as one of the first wow moments within Dreams. Now, I had other ones I wanted to talk about, but this video is already way too long. As you can tell, there are a lot of Dreams that I think are incredible and a lot of ones that I think are really important to the game as a whole, and these are just some that I think represent the game very, very well. There's a bunch of others, but if you are interested in that sort of list, if you want me to expand upon this list, let me know. I could easily do that. But for now, that's going to be the end of this. Let me know how y'all are enjoying Dreams so far if you have it, if you're excited for Friday because you don't have early access. I am too. I can't wait to get that copy in my game because that copy of my game physically, because that's when it's going to feel real to me. But at any rate, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you guys soon. And yeah, for now, goodbye.